Quilombo, Quilombo, Quilombo. Do you want to know what is the most important word in Black Brazilian history and culture today? In this video, I am going to break down Quilombo. Yes, say it with me now. It looks kind of strange, but say it with me. Quilombo. I'm going to break down this word for you because there's a simple definition, but if you live in Brazil and enjoy Black Brazilian activities, you'll understand that this word has so much history and weight in it that people are beginning to use it in ways that apply to modern day life. By the way, you guys, my name is Kiratiana. I'm a journalist living in Rio de Janeiro, and I've been here for the past 4 years. And I've learned so much over the past 4 years that I'm ready to share it with the world. And I feel confident that I know what I know. So that's why I'm doing all these videos on very interesting subjects, a majority of them about Afro-Brazilian subjects. So if you've watched several of my videos already, you've probably heard me talking about a person named Zumbi do Quilombo das Palmares. Zumbi was the leader of a Quilombo that existed in the 17th century, the 1600s. And at this time, Quilombos were self-sustaining Black communities that usually consisted of a majority of the people were escaped slaves. Historical records do indicate that there were some poor white people and there were some people who actually were born in the Quilombos. But if you can imagine at that time, majority of Brazil was just undiscovered land. So if you did escape from a plantation or escape from slavery, you could literally just go into the forest and build your own community. And at the time in the 17th century, the Palmares Quilombo existed in what people consider current day Alagoas, Pernambuco. And this Quilombo managed to have a population of 30,000 people. Of course, at the time, that's a lot of people. And of course, authorities at the time, the Portuguese and even the Dutch, were scared of this independent community of Black people, of 30,000 people. So over the century, there were many battles, many attempts to actually end this community. And unfortunately, what ended up happening is that at the end of the 17th century, Zumbi dos Palmares, as he's called in Brazil, did eventually lose a battle against the Portuguese to protect his Quilombo community. And this happened at the very end of the 17th century. And actually, Zumbi was killed on November 20th. So keep this in your mind. Keep in your mind that a Quilombo is a community of Black people that is totally self-sustaining. It doesn't rely on white people. It doesn't rely on modern things. This community exists and it does everything that it needs to do and that it wants to do to survive. That is literally the basic definition of a Quilombo. Now here's where the word gets tricky, because there are Quilombos in modern day Brazil. And what I don't want you to do, I don't want you to be like me, because when I first visited Brazil in 2003, I heard about these Quilombos. I heard about the word Quilombo, and people would tell me, oh yeah, there's Quilombos all over Brazil. And so I actually thought that there were Quilombos that where the descendants of escaped slaves actually lived. It's not quite like that. Modern day Quilombos are communities of Black people that are reminiscent of those Quilombos that existed during the time of slavery. And when in Portuguese people say reminiscent, it basically means that these are self-sustaining, somewhat secluded communities of Black people. That's the key. Quilombos are communities of Black people. And Brazil has thousands of these communities around the country, and these communities actually are recognized by the government, similar to how indigenous communities are recognized. And some of the communities even have titles to their land. But you cannot say that all of the people in these communities are descendants of escaped, enslaved Black people. No, that's not the case. Sometimes I've been to actually about probably 6 Quilombos, 6 rural Quilombos in my lifetime. And basically what I found is that sometimes the communities were founded by, one person soon after the end of slavery who basically decided to start a community somewhat secluded in the forest, and then other Blacks joined them. There's a Quilombo in Costa Rica in which the owner of the slave plantation actually wrote a letter giving the land to the Black people who worked this plantation. So there's all types of ways that Quilombos can exist today in Brazil. Now that we got the technical definition of Quilombo out the way, let's go into how Afro-Brazilians use this word today. Whew. Yes, I am drinking a caipirinha. The only reason I'm drinking a caipirinha is because it's been so long since I've done so many videos that sometimes I need to relax my mind and just get in the mood. So I made a homemade caipirinha with Selena cachaça. Let me break it down to you guys. It gets tricky. Now, one thing that you have to always remember in your mind when you're studying about Black Brazil, when you're around Black Brazil, is that segregation was never legally sanctioned. Don't get me wrong now. There is some segregation in Brazil. It's just different from America, where there were actually laws that separated Blacks from whites. And because there was never ever legal segregation, there isn't this really strict division between what is Black and what is white. And so very few things in Brazil can be truly claimed as Black or truly claimed as only for white people, because there's just not that division. White people do have the freedom to practice candomblé. White people have the freedom to practice capoeira. White people play samba. I mean, there's just not that division. Of course, in America, white people do hip hop. White people do breakdancing. Yes, it happens, but we readily acknowledge those things as just that's our culture. In Brazil, it's a little bit different. So I've come to the conclusion that the only thing that is 100% Black in Brazil is quilombos. This word Quilombo, when anyone in Brazil hears the word Quilombo, they're going to think Black people. And actually, it's very interesting because I visited, of the rural Quilombo communities that I've visited in Brazil, most of the communities, they're not very mixed race. When you go there, you see people who look very, who do not look as mixed race as you might find in the city. And so when I say, oh, Quilombo, the image that pops in everybody's mind is Blackness, Black people who have their own land. So if you can imagine, if you're a Black Brazilian in the city and you hear about Quilombos, there are so many ways that you can kind of work with this word to apply it to your own life in the city. When you say the word Quilombo to a conscious Afro-Brazilian, because there's a difference, the image that pops into someone's mind is of a Black person who owns their own land and is free from the restraints of racism and capitalism. You got that? Basically, and if there's I'm trying to figure out if there's a word in English that can be comparable. Because when I say Quilombo, to me, When I hear the word Quilombo in Brazil, I feel like we're about to do our own thing. This is a black folks things. It's about us. This is for black people. The interesting thing that I find about this word Quilombo is that in America, and maybe even in a place like Great Britain or France, I'm not going to talk about Africa because I don't think that this word Quilombo really applies to Africa because Africa is all black. But in America, there's this element in which if there are tons of black people in a white space, we're always going to try to create our own thing and do our own thing independent of white people. That isn't quite as natural in Brazil, mainly because it's traditionally, historically been suppressed. Like the government does not want black people to start their own communities, their own businesses just for black. That has never been something that the government has supported. Whereas in America, that was supported through the way in which segregation happened. You know, when you're basically pushing black people to live in their own area within a small area like Chicago, black people have to start businesses that serve them. That's just never has been the traditional case in Brazil. Let's talk about the other words that are related to Quilombo. So the first word related to the word Quilombo is quilombismo. I think in English we would probably say quilombism. This word was made popular by black activist Abdias Nascimento when he published a book named Quilombismo in 1970. The book introduced several proposals in how black people could unite to overcome institutionalized racism. He created this word quilombismo because the original quilombos were places where black people lived free from racism and they united to build self-sustaining communities. So quilombismo is this all-encompassing word that defines black people breaking free from racism and capitalism. Abdias Nascimento went on to also expand the definition of a quilombo. He thought that a quilombo is also a Catholic brotherhood, a black Catholic brotherhood, a samba school, or even the terreiro of a candomblé sect. Another word related to quilombo is AQUILOMBAMENTO. AQUILOMBAMENTO is actually a new word that I've been hearing lately. This is literally the act of black people uniting in an affront to oppression and racism. Now, I know that to you guys, that probably means like black people maybe having a manifestation, a protest, or black people creating a group against racism. Yeah, that is an example of AQUILOMBAMENTO, but AQUILOMBAMENTO and an affront to oppression can also be as simple as black people performing samba music in downtown Rio. I just went to a samba event called Arure this week on a rooftop in Lapa, and let me just tell you, an AQUILOMBAMENTO went down. I mean, black folks were singing samba music that was very closely related to black culture, black expression, and they just did their thing. They danced, they made it this space that is typically a white space, they made it their own. And of course, the verb of AQUILOMBAMENTO is si AQUILOMBAR. That's when you, black people that is, are educating yourself about your history. It's when you're uniting with other black people to create positive communities. So do you get this word Quilombo? Yeah. It's very complicated, and quite frankly, you probably won't really get it until you actually lived in Brazil for some time period. Now, what do you call someone who actually is from a Quilombo? Well, you call that person Quilombola. Quilombola is the name of a person who was typically born and raised in a Quilombo community. There are actual urban Quilombos throughout Brazil. And one of the best examples of an urban Quilombo is a place called Aparelha, Luzia in Sao Paulo. This is maybe on the outset you might call it I would call it a black culture club. I mean, it's somewhere in between a club because you can go there and dance and have fun, but it also offers all of these cultural events that are black and are aimed at black people. And so it's an urban Quilombo because they are targeting all of their activities towards Black people, and they expect Black people to support it. And it's also self-sustaining. That's the key, self-sustaining. This Urban Quilombo is actually doing a crowdfunding campaign right now, and I'm going to put the information of the crowdfunding campaign down below in the information below. But that's probably the best urban example of an urban Quilombo, but there's other examples. Now, I would also say that samba schools were historically examples of urban Quilombos. And the reason why I wouldn't call samba schools urban Quilombos now is because they do tend to rely a lot on white support, white people. But if you know the history of samba schools, which I guess I have to teach you guys eventually, you will know that urban Quilombos were started in favela communities, and they were a social collective way for Black people to come together around carnival. That's an urban Quilombo. Like I said, the most basic definition of a Quilombo is that we're doing our own thing and we don't need your help, okay? We're doing our own thing and we don't need your help. So samba schools have traditionally been urban Quilombos. Another example of an urban Quilombo that is no longer necessarily an urban Quilombo is Pedro de Sal in Rio de Janeiro. About 100, maybe 120 years ago, after the end of slavery in Brazil, this area of Pedro de Sal, which is down by the port area of Rio de Janeiro, this area was an area where Black people lived and created their own communities. It was an urban Quilombo. Whew, I'm tired. Now, here's what I want you to do for me. And you can do this activity if you're Black or white. I want you to tell me what are the Quilombos in your community. Because if you are in a community that does have Black people, more than likely there is going to be a Quilombo. And like I said before, there are urban Quilombos. This word that has traditionally been applied to rural communities can be applied to self-sustaining communities in urban communities. So explain to me down below, what is the Quilombo in your community? Also, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to follow me at these 2 Instagram profiles up top. Yes, Kiratiana and Afro-Real Trial. If you want more interesting topics about mainly Black Brazil. I got some non-Black Brazil stuff coming to you, but mainly about Black Brazil. And if there's something you want to know about Brazil that you think I would know a lot about, please drop it in the comments. I really want to know what you guys want to know, and I'll do you a video. Thanks.